Kids are bad at nearly everything compared to adults. They cannot drive, they cannot work, and have complete reliance on those older than them to guide them through life. One thing that kids do have from adults, though, is hope. Kids will believe in anything shown to them by an adult and will suspend their disbelief even at the most outlandish ideas. The most principal example of this is Santa. Despite the numerous plot holes in the story of St. Nick, children around the world believe that every 25th of December, a bearded man with a twinkle in his eye and a stomach like jelly visits their house to leave presents for them. Kids remain steadfast in having hope he'll come, and contrary to almost every other skill in life, hope seems to be the only one to decline as we grow older, leaving kids that live in a bright and hopeful world, while adults face reality and hopelessness. The year is 1946. Disney's 8th feature film, Make Mine Music, is released. The first V-2 rocket is launched in the United States, and Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump were born. The Best Years of Our Lives by RKO tops the charts for the highest grossing movie, and along with The Razor's Edge, these two films win half of all of the awards given out at both the 4th Golden Globe Awards and the 19th Academy Awards. At the Golden Globe, though, one award stands out above the rest. The Best Director award is presented to Frank Capra for a movie he produced, financed, directed, and co-wrote. A little-known film that killed his production company, Liberty Films, and whose production has been described as nothing less than a nightmare. It's a Wonderful Life released to lackluster acclaim, and only returned $3.3 million on its $3.7 million budget. Coming off the cusp of World War II, the general public largely rejected the sentiment of the movie. The movie marked the end of Capra's career, and although he remained hopeful for filmmaking and continued to produce movies, none reached the level of stardom that his previous works did. In decades to come, though, his movie would become a staple during the holiday season. The film's big break came in 1972, when due to sheer incompetence, failure to renew the film's copyright allowed it to transition into the public domain, and thus, TV channels played the movie non-stop during Christmas time, at no cost to them. It was a hit to a new generation of nostalgic filmgoers, and sparked new interest in the movie, but despite this, since Capra no longer owned the movie's copyright, he made no money off it, and simply sat back and watched this film garnered unprecedented attention. When asked about the movie's success, Frank Capra told the Wall Street Journal, "The film has a life of its own now, and I can look at it like I had nothing to do with it. I'm like a parent whose kid grows up to be the president. I'm proud, but it's the kid who did all the work." In Greek mythology, all of the evils of the world originate from Pandora's box. Pandora is given a box by the Greek god Zeus with one command: do not ever open it. Eventually, curiosity gets the best of her, and after opening it, all evils of the world are released. It is a chilling idea that all suffering, hardship, sorrow, disease, vice, violence, greed, madness, old age, and death released from one person's curiosity. But I think what is all the more frightening is what is left in the box after she opens it. Hope. Hope is the traditional translation, but could also carry the more cynical translation of deceptive expectation. Throughout It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey is adamant about traveling the world, kicking the dust off his shoes and leaving behind his hometown Bedford Falls. So when his father, owner of Bailey Building and Loan, dies, he initially does not want to take over the company and work in a small, isolated, and seemingly arbitrary office. Begrudgingly, he does though, in an act of self-sacrifice, and he holds out hope of still exploring the world someday. Only, disaster never lets him explore. At every chance he has to leave his comfort zone, he is denied his opportunity. This is immediately seen when, during a date with his love interest Mary, he is interrupted by the death of his father and immediately leaves her to be with his family. Later, the draft happens, and while all of his family and friends are sent to remote locations, he is homebound because of an ear injury he sustained when he saved his little brother when he was younger. Finally, at the chance to land a job of a lifetime working for Mr. Potter, he turns it down in favor of keeping his father's business open. This balancing act between George Bailey's own self-interests contrasting with his selflessness continues throughout his life. It goes as far as driving him to the brink of suicide, but ironically in the end, it's his own selflessness that saves him from killing himself. He had completely dedicated himself to those around him, and even when faced with suicide, he chooses others over his own will. George Bailey never sees the impact he has on the world and the effect that his complete dedication to his community has, and this is developed throughout the film with the use of disembodied voices. The film starts with various nameless and faceless characters praying for George Bailey, and his impact on them and their relationships to him are revealed through the opening lines of the movie.
I owe everything to George Bailey.
Help my son George tonight. Please, God, something's the matter with Daddy.
These quotes show George's friend, George's mom, and George's daughter, and the compassion they all share for George. Establishing shots show the roof of various houses along with these voices, showing how although George's impact is unseen, it is there, and people do care. This use of off-screen elements is further demonstrated more subtly to make the audience feel something, such as comedy when a drunk man walks off screen and you hear a car crash, or sympathy when you hear a train whistle in the distance showing George's fleeting opportunity. All of these embodied voices echo the unseen effect of George's work. After these initial shots showing Bedford Falls and hearing the various voices of the town to set the scene, the movie spends a majority of the time building George's character, using a sequence of flashbacks to highlight how he had always been a good and selfless man, from when he was a child, to adolescence, and all the way to adulthood. The progression of time is developed in various ways, but most principally subtly changing characters, but keeping them consistent to show how they've aged and developed. Violet, for instance, wears pink when she's a little girl, but later on in life as an adult, she continues to wear pink, even though she is much older. This is also seen with Mr. Potter, as he starts the movie as an old businessman, but at the end, he is unable to walk and in a wheelchair, showing time passing. The prominent thesis of this sequence is that George had constantly been a man of self-sacrifice, and the foremost example of this is when his family business is threatened with closure, he goes broke and gives up his honeymoon to save it. His wedding in particular serves as a milestone in George's life, because although it was a cheerful celebration, it looked more like a funeral than a wedding, with dreary weather and all in attendance carrying black umbrellas. The fitting theme for this funeral is the song Buffalo Gals, as the song is used throughout the movie to show first a blooming love, then frustration, and finally nostalgia and lament. Along with gaining Mary as a wife though, he gains Mr. Potter as an enemy, and when kids are added to the mix along with financial struggles, George's hope is burning out. He is offered the job of a lifetime of Mr. Potter and the chance to see the world on business trips, but because of the need to close the family business in order to take the job, he refuses. This eats at George. When he loses $8,000 the day of his bank inspection, he caves and begs Mr. Potter for help. Mr. Potter says George is worth more dead than alive, and this is the last straw that breaks the camel's back. George sits in silence, not listening to Mr. Potter's speech about going to jail, clearly lost in deep thought and in contemplation of the ultimate sacrifice of self. George walks aimlessly to a bridge and stares into the ocean, ready to kill himself. George had finally lost all hope, and tension is built as music rises when the camera shows George Bailey looking onto the ocean, then cutting to shots of the choppy and murky waters below. But as he is staring into the water, another man jumps in and begs for help, and George, being selfless as always, saves him. This person turns out to be his guardian angel, Clarence, and Clarence shows him what his life truly meant. He shows George the impact of his work and how he improved Bedford Falls. After George's experience, he realizes the value of family and his work, and no longer cares about going to jail, but just cares about his family and friends. He immediately returns home where he embraces his family, and they all embrace him in celebration of Christmas and all the good work he's done. This is the first time that everyone who is affected by his work is seen and come together to thank George and show their appreciation, and disembodied voices in the beginning of the film all come together in the end to highlight the fruits of his labors. It took George losing all hope and hitting rock bottom to realize that, although his younger self wanted to explore the world, what he really wanted was right in front of him, and his wanderlust and urge to do something important was achieved right in his hometown in Bedford Falls.